When your strength becomes your identity, feedback or perception feels like a threat. And then we want to armor up. We want to protect ourselves. We want to manage the narrative. We want to manipulate the situation. This is how humans work. Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I am so glad you are here today. So late last year, I was preparing for a board meeting, getting ready to present our 3-year strategic plan. And I sent the strategic plan to them ahead of time, and I got feedback. The plan is too complicated. There's everything in here. What is the priority? And the feedback landed because I had actually thought the same thing. I was going through the strategic plan and I was like, this is just far too tactical. It's hard to understand what the most important thing is. But I didn't stop to change it because we were all so busy and my team had put so much work into it. And I thought it would be far too disruptive to change it so close to the board meeting. So when I got the feedback, I was like, yes, this is spot on. They are right. I should have done this beforehand, even if it meant postponing the board meeting because we weren't ready. And I appreciated it because, oh my gosh, what has come out of the feedback and redoing our strategic plan has been amazing. It's so much clearer now, and we have a very clear strategic choice. We really have identified what the problem is that we're trying to solve and have a clear and ambitious roadmap to get there. So, this feedback was excellent. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about what happened after I got that feedback and how I talked to my team about it. I was absolutely willing to redo the plan. I knew they were right and that we could do better. What I was less willing to do was look like I had missed it with my team. I postponed the board meeting with the commitment to simplify and rework the strategy. And then I had to tell my team what happened, why we weren't meeting with the board, and what we needed to do going forward. And my natural instinct, being an achiever, being a person who wants to manage the narrative all of the time, who wants to manage image all of the time, was to over explain, was to position the language, adding context that I had already thought about this, trying to signal that I had seen it too, really almost like making excuses or over explaining why we didn't see this before, why I didn't see this before, and lead them in the right way. And what I realized with this messaging and how I wanted to control the narrative was that I was armoring up. I was not in denial. It was not an ego explosion. It was this subtle reputation protection that I was going into. I didn't want it to look messy, even though it was going to be messy. This is the work that I have been doing. How do I let go of this wound of I am not enough and the feelings of inadequacy that come up when somebody says something and I haven't thought of it first, or I knew that we should do something, but we didn't do it, or just I flat out missed it. I always want to control that narrative. And this is really deep and powerful work. And so I wanted to share this with you today because we leaders all have something like this. Yours might not be controlling the narrative, that reputation protection, but my hunch is that no matter what your personality style is and how you lead, reputation protection is important to you. And you do things to make sure that you are armoring up, that you can control that narrative, that you are deciding how people should perceive what you are about to say or do, or the decisions that you make. And now I want to name the real fear. It was not the feedback that my board gave me. That did not threaten my authority, although that might seem odd to some people, but my board is incredibly supportive, absolutely here to help me grow this company, to grow as a CEO. I was not afraid to say to them, thank you for this feedback. What did threaten my authority, which is a story that was in my own head, is how my team would perceive this. And this is all down to identity. How you see yourself as a leader, your identity as a leader drives the way that you do things. It drives your decision making, it drives your conversations, it drives your energy, it drives everything. I'm known as a strategic leader. I'm known as being clear. I'm known as being decisive. And so my fear was, on how they would perceive this. Before we got the feedback from the board, I knew the strategic plan was too much and I didn't act because I was afraid they would think that I was overcomplicating the process. I was afraid that they would say, why didn't she see this before and lead us down this path to begin with? Why did it take board feedback to get her to act? And then when I had to share with them that we were, in fact, going to redo this strategic plan, I thought they would think, how did she miss something so obvious? Would they see me as less competent, less sharp? Here's the key idea that I want to state clearly about this podcast episode. When your strength becomes your identity, feedback or perception feels like a threat. And then we want to armor up. We want to protect ourselves. We want to manage the narrative. We want to manipulate the situation. This is how humans work. This is not something that is unique to me or to even just leaders. It is unique to all of us as individuals. We all have wounds. We all want to protect ourselves. So we go into this, I have to defend myself mode, whatever that looks like to you. I love to look at this identity threat and the resulting actions and behaviors that come from it through the lens of being in the arena. I love Theodore Roosevelt's quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming." That is what being in the arena is. And I am in the arena every day. I am absolutely not afraid to fight. I'm not sitting in the stands criticizing. In fact, I try really hard not to criticize anybody because I understand that most of us are leading from our wounds, from our trauma. I understand that making decisions is hard. I understand that being a leader is hard. And I am not one to criticize other people. I don't even want to put that energy out into the world anyway. I am building, I am leading, I am risking. And I think most leaders are. We wouldn't be leaders if we were not willing to get into the arena. But what I noticed in this whole process is that I still want to wear armor in the arena, not to protect my body, but armor to protect my identity. Yeah, let that land. That's big. Most of us are willing to be in the arena, but we want to control how the dust looks. We want to fight, but not bleed visibly. So, what is armor in leadership terms? It's over explaining things, trying to make sure people see it your way. It's subtle positioning so you can manage people's perception. It's narrative control. It's rushing to clarity. It's moving too fast. It's overperforming. It's workaholism. It's all of these things. Armor protects our reputation. But what I have learned over the years is that this armor is heavy. It limits movement. It dulls sensation. And it prevents the fight from actually shaping you. I believe there is a difference between performing in the arena and being changed in the arena. And that's what leadership is about. It is not about just performing and doing everything right, because let's face it, most of us aren't doing everything right. It's really about how are we willing to grow and learn because we are in the arena? How messy are we willing to get and show other people that mess? So ask yourself this question as you ponder this podcast. Am I fighting bravely or am I fighting carefully to protect how I look while I'm fighting? Going back to my email to my team, as I wanted to control the narrative, do the subtle positioning, make sure my reputation was intact, I realized it was not about being perfect. It's not. In fact, perfectionism is not my thing. It might be yours. It wasn't about being perfect. It was more about the fear of being seen before the outcome redeems me. It's a fear of being judged, being diminished, calling my leadership into question. It was a vulnerable space. And when you want to control the narrative, it's usually because you know that it feels like a vulnerable moment and you want to armor up so it doesn't feel so vulnerable. I love Brene Brown. She often talks about vulnerability, and she says vulnerability is having the courage to show up even when you can't control the outcome. And the reality is that we can never control the outcome. We can make decisions to the best of our ability, and then we have to let things play out. And we might not get the intended outcome. And that creates this vulnerability. It creates that fear of not doing things right, of not being perfect, of not being seen as a good decision maker. But that's the point. The fear is not imperfection, it's lack of control over interpretation. So, the heart of my story here is that my fear was not about imperfection. That didn't bother me. In fact, it wasn't even a second thought with my board. It was the lack of control that I had over the interpretation of my team. That is what made me not want to just show the mess and say, you know what? I saw this and I missed it because I thought it was going to be too much work to redo and I should have done it differently. And that kind of visibility is required because visibility precedes credibility. People have to see you in the arena doing the dirty work, getting messy, fighting without all that armor on to build that credibility. But we leaders, we don't think that. We think that we have to be perfect. That credibility is what needs to be managed. And therefore, we have to manage the visibility of what people see. But people want to work for real leaders. They don't require perfection, at least not most of them do. They require realness, they require clarity, and they want to see a leader say, you know what, I could have done that better. Let's pause and make sure that we nail it this time and not worry about how messy it looks. So, what did I do differently? Because I've drafted that email and I wanted to control the narrative, but I paused and I reread the draft and I caught the positioning language. And I asked myself, am I clarifying for alignment or am I protecting my image? And that question was critical because I knew I was trying to protect my image. So I removed the extra content. I didn't over explain. I simplified the message. I owned the complexity without trying to spin it. And that required something from me. It required me tolerating being seen as wrong, tolerating being seen as incomplete, tolerating being seen mid adjustment. And it was uncomfortable, not strategically uncomfortable. I was 100% in alignment with the feedback and knew what we needed to change. And I even knew how to go change it. But it was uncomfortable from that identity perspective. I am not a good leader unless I had this all figured out, unless I would have seen it, stopped it, and redid it before we got the feedback from the board. That was where I was brushing up against my identity. And so even though this new plan is fantastic and I grew and the team grew because of the revised plan, the true growth didn't come from that. The true growth came from tolerating the exposure, tolerating being seen as messy. So now let's talk about how you actually do that because this is hard. And why I'm putting this podcast out there is that I'm challenging you to really think about how you attach your worth to perception. And I want to talk about a couple of things that I do to help myself unhook from that I'm not worthy unless people see me as worthy. This is grounded in practice, not theory. These are the things I do every day when I feel my ego stepping in and saying, oh, yeah, wait, stop. You got to make sure you look good here. You got to make sure that everybody sees you as a good leader. The first discipline that I practice is pausing before protecting. When I catch myself wanting to over explain something to manage that narrative, I pause. I notice my defensive clarification and I do not send that first draft or I stop myself in the moment. So when you hear yourself starting to explain something, pause. I ask myself this question in real time and I encourage you to do the same. What am I afraid they will think about me right now? And I name the fear. And when you name the fear, it loses the power. It loses power when it's exposed. So name that fear, pause, and ask yourself, where is this coming from? The second thing I do is I separate performance from my identity. Now, this is just a practice that I've been putting into play this last year because I didn't really fully understand how much I overperformed, how much I really felt like I had to constantly prove myself, and how much that was part of my identity. And so I started doing this really deep work. So this is a practice that I'm still putting into place right now, and it is hard work. So what I did in this situation to separate my performance from my identity in this situation, I said, a complicated plan does not mean that I'm incompetent. A miss does not redefine who I am as a leader. I shifted this internal question from what does this make me look like to what is this shaping in me? And that is how you detach worth from perception. And it frames it as a growth opportunity. How does this make me look? That question makes me want to manage the narrative. And when I changed it to what is this shaping in me, I could use it as a growth moment. I could use it to pause and say, I am changing the way that I show up in this situation. And I am not going to over explain and try to protect my reputation in this instant, because this is a growth opportunity. And then the third thing I do is I practice this visible process in contained ways. And I do that by admitting an uncertainty without packaging it as brilliance. Like, oh, I had this epiphany and we need to pause and redo it. Isn't it brilliant that I came up with this idea? No, just say, you know what? I'm not 100% sure and I've got to go figure this out. You can say, I missed that without layering in context. Simply, you can just say, I missed that. Thanks for pointing it out. I'm going to redo it. You don't have to come up with the reasons why you missed it. Oh, I missed it because of this, or I did see it, but I didn't do it because of XYZ. Stop making excuses. Stop over explaining. Just say, I missed it. You do not have to layer in the context. It is okay to let people see your adjustment in real time. That's what I did with my team. And in fact, all those stories that I told myself, they were absolutely not true anyway. My team was 100% on board with redoing the plan, and they jumped in and we redid it, and everybody was so excited, and it created stronger alignment and commitment than I've seen in a strategic plan in years and years and years. And when you do these disciplines over time, you're going to see that applause of like, yeah, you did that so right, stops regulating your identity. And you start to see that alignment is what regulates your identity. It doesn't matter if you did it right or wrong. It doesn't matter how messy it was in the process. What matters is that you have alignment, and that is the goal. Clarity and alignment. That is what we need to do as leaders. So, as we get ready to close, I want to challenge you, especially as a high performer. And I'm going to make this slightly uncomfortable. High performers do not avoid doing hard work. We're willing to put in the effort. But what we do avoid is humiliation. We will fix the plan, we will work harder, we will correct the issue, but we want to still look sharp while doing it. So I encourage you to ask yourself these questions. If my team cannot see me in process, do they believe that they're allowed to be in the process? And if I subtly protect my sharpness, what am I teaching them about mistakes? When does composure become concealment? Ask yourself these questions. The answer can lead to some very powerful insights. All right, let's talk about the key takeaways from this episode. Number one, there is a difference between being in the arena and being changed by the arena. If we're in the arena, but we're not willing to show people the messiness, show people the dust, show people the blood that we go through when we're in the arena, then we are not being changed by the arena. Number two, armor in leadership often looks like over explanation and narrative control. Number three, when strength becomes an identity, the way that you see yourself, feedback or misperception feels threatening and you want to armor up. Number four, messy courage is tolerating being seen before the outcome redeems you, to say, look at this great decision I made. It takes a tolerance. You have to build up that tolerance to have the courage to let people see the mess. Number five, growth happens in exposure, not in the polish of retelling it. And finally, number six, detaching worth from perception requires practicing visible adjustment in real time. Let your people see you make adjustments real time. So in closing, we go and present the strategic plan to the board, and it was a resounding, you guys nailed it. The plan was so much better. My team walked out with huge smiles on their faces and ready to roll this out to the whole company with an operational plan. The outcome was strong. But that was not the real win. The real win for me was removing the armor of saying it's okay to let people see the mess. So I asked myself this question preparing for this podcast. What if the next level of my leadership is not sharper strategy, but less armor? Where are you explaining when you could just simply own it, not make an excuse? And where are you polishing the bruise before anyone sees it? The purpose of this podcast episode is to invite you to look at where you are armoring up, where you can find the courage to let people see the messy middle of decision making, of strategy, of building teams, of building culture, of executing to a plan. I hope this episode encourages you to really look at your identity and where you over-identify with something and how that causes you to show up in an inauthentic way, to manage the narrative, to control things, to simply just not say anything. When you dig into yourself and understand that identity and are willing to be vulnerable, are willing to show the mess in the arena, your life and your leadership will change. With that, I leave you for your day. If you think someone could benefit from this episode, please feel free to share it with them. And if you like this podcast and haven't subscribed to it, please go over to YouTube and do so, or to your favorite podcast platform and leave me a comment, send me a DM, rate or write a review on the podcast. I so appreciate it. And I look forward to hosting you next week. Take care.